We start by saying that this is the largest wealth creation opportunity of, sort of our lifetimes, right? Like there will be nothing else that will produce more wealth, more jobs, more work than anything else, right? Property taxes, like you name it, we're going to be paying it, right? We're going to be the largest wealth creators across the country. So now the question really becomes, what does it take, right? What does it take to actually get that money in the door?
The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today, deploy, deploy, deploy. Can you guess who my guest is? Welcome to the show, Jigar Shah.
Oh my goodness. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that that tagline is associated with me.
I love it. And I'm biased, of course, because I work for a construction company, and that's what we're all about is boots on the ground and putting steel in the ground and glass on the cornfields. And it's heady days here in Illinois, Jigger. We just had a record year in the solar industry. We now have 111 community solar gardens that are nearing completion. We have some 400 to 500 megawatts of utility scale solar that is literally coming out of the ground now. But here we sit on the cusp of a new administration in DC, and this is a great opportunity for us on January 6th. The election results are coming in from Georgia, and it might be a new era in Washington, D.C. So we're going to talk about how Illinoisans and Midwesterners can take advantage of the new circumstances that we find ourselves in.
Well, it's one of those things where attitude matters, right? I mean, the clean energy industry has been winning consistently for the last 4 years. So it's not like the Trump administration has really slowed anything down. Instead, with FIJA and in Illinois, and you've got all these major programs in Iowa and major programs in Indiana and Michigan. I mean, the Midwest has been doing a lot the last 4 years. I think the real question is, with this new attitude, could it do more? And to me, that's worth exploring, because my sense is that we're talking about $1 trillion a year of investment that the private sector is willing to put to work. And the Midwest has to raise its hand and say how much of that it wants.
Yeah, I'm tired of playing second fiddle to the coasts. We have to think bigger in the Midwest. Illinois could use over 100 gigawatts of solar, just Illinois. And so if you take Michigan and Wisconsin and Minnesota and Iowa, we're talking hundreds of gigawatts of renewable energy to make the clean energy transition. And yes, some states are putting a stake in the ground with 100% RPSs, and that's a good thing. Illinois, we're going there. The writing is on the wall with the Pritzker administration. Just question of when. And so you talk about $1 trillion a year. I like that. That has a nice ring to it. That certainly is substantive and a wartime effort. We need to think about the energy transition in terms of really saving our butts from this thing called climate change that is lurking in the wings, and not so much lurking many times, right, with all the fires and floods and natural disasters around the world. So how do you break it down, though, for local governments, for people in industry? What is the opportunity in your mind?
Well, I think we start by saying that this is the largest wealth creation opportunity of, sort of our lifetimes, right? Like there will be nothing else that will produce more wealth, more jobs, more work than anything else, right? Property taxes, like you name it, we're going to be paying it, right? We're going to be the largest wealth creators across the country. So now the question really becomes, what does it take, right? What does it take to actually get that money in the door? We can talk across all sorts of technologies, right? The first one I think we talk about is electricity, or sector, sorry, electricity. And, when you think about where we are today, the cost of wind power and solar power in the Midwest beats the cost of wholesale power today in MISO's territory. MISO has 57 gigawatts of solar sitting in the transmission queue, and then, a lot of wind as well in there. You've got transmission companies like SoBe that are so green that is using rail infrastructure to build their transmission, right? Warren Buffett owns the largest amount of that rail infrastructure with BSNF. And so they can build it. So I don't think it's a matter of cost and it's not a matter of technology. It's a matter of willpower and around folks saying, we are going to organize ourselves to actually get this done. We are going to figure out which corridors we want to put transmission in. We're going to figure out who we want to support in terms of landowners to put, solar on the ground and wind on the ground. And, who wants to help with rate basing transmission and rate basing all of these costs, et cetera, right? Like there's enough to go around. So no one's going to be without, right? The utilities will have plenty to rate base and the construction groups and the unions and everyone else will have their fair share of jobs and work to do. But the challenge really is around getting these counties, right? I mean, I grew up in Whiteside County with, population of probably 100,000 people. And when you think about that county, it is still shell shocked from when Northwestern Steel and Wire shut down in the 80s, right? It still has no idea what it wants to do for economic development, right? The Rock Falls, municipal utility still doesn't actually know that it has over $1.4 billion of free money available to it from the USDA and from the US Treasury Department that it could raise its hand and get to deploy a lot of this technology.
You're putting your finger on something that I think is very important for our listeners, and that is that organizations must transform, must disrupt themselves from within, or they will be disrupted from without. Elon Musk is disrupting the auto industry from without, and GM might be able to do it and stay alive, but many of the legacy automakers are going to go extinct. They just do not see the tipping point that is coming with the electric vehicle opportunity. And so there's an analogy in the electricity industry that will, for one, we are going to triple the grid, right? When we electrify transportation, we need a lot more juice on the grid. We obviously need a lot more clean juice to make the energy transition, but that combination is the killer app. It's good for everyone, as you mentioned, no matter where you are in the economy. If you're a local government, you stand to win. If you're the mayor of Sterling, Illinois, you can find ways to tap into this opportunity. But if you look in the rearview mirror, right, all you see is corn and beans and heavy industry. You don't see the clean energy revolution. It's just now showing up in the newspapers and in the cornfields. So how do we catch up, so to speak, and start really stepping on the gas towards the transformation?
But well, so I don't think it's catching up, right? I mean, I think I view it as choosing to lead, right? I think that to suggest that the Midwest is any farther behind than Texas or North Carolina or Georgia or Florida or California is just simply not true, right? The total amount of renewable energy that we have in the US grid today is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 10% of the US grid is large hydro renewables. And so let's not get ahead of ourselves. We've got to get that number from 10% up to 60, 70% by 2035, right? So the vast majority of renewable energy that we're going to be installing in these great United States of America is in the next 15 years. It's not what has been done in the last 20 years, right? So no one is behind. What they have to do is to go out and claim theirs, right? We can either build all of this solar power in the desert Southwest and then just transmit it to Chicago via transmission lines, or we could actually put people to work here in the Midwest, right? And I think people just got to make a choice, right? The land isn't an issue. To suggest for a moment that we have to use productive farmland for this is ridiculous. The amount of brownfield acreage we have in the Midwest is gargantuan, right? The amount of land that is fallow every year is gargantuan. So this isn't a land issue, right? It's a planning issue, right? So people have to plan, and people have to say that they want what they want, right? I'll give you an example. The town of Sterling, Illinois, that I grew up in Whiteside County, their total city budget is 10 million a year, right? For them to get $10 million a year in property taxes from wind and solar developers would be easy in just Whiteside County. If you take all of the municipal budgets in Whiteside County, it might be 35 million a year, right? From Rock Falls, Dixon, well, Dixon's in Lee County, but like, Morrison, et cetera. The whole county might only have $35 million a year worth of expenses. To get 100% of that from clean energy would be fairly easy in Whiteside County, right? And so I think people need to think that big. That is how big the numbers are that we're talking about. Is that for a lot of these rural counties, we could actually replace their entire tax base with property tax payments from the renewable energy sector if they actually wanted to be part of the planning process.
So what smoky back room is that planning process happening in? What is the doorway?
Well, in the new Trump era, I think what we've learned is that there are no smoky back rooms, right? The smoky back room is Twitter. It's happening right in front of people. They're just not plugged into the right Twitter group. They just need to start reading different tweets. Delete unfollow your real Donald Trump account and, follow other people, right? That's where we are. This stuff is hiding in plain sight. When you look at what the Energy Foundation is doing and the Environmental Law and Policy Center is doing and all the great organizations from Five Lakes to others in the Midwest, it's not like these people are hard to find. The folks that are doing the planning are there, right? They're not in some smoky dark room. The challenge is there's a lot of people who have been told that help is coming, and then when help came, they didn't recognize it as help. They were like, no, I want you to build another manufacturing facility that makes dishwasher soap or whatever it is. And that's not coming, not this week. Now, maybe it'll come next week. I don't know, but it's not coming this week. What's coming this week is a huge amount of wind and solar jobs. And with those jobs comes local manufacturing. Like it's not cost effective to do all the sheet metal bending in one place and ship all those components 500 miles. You want to do all that sheet metal bending, nearby. Well, you know this from your own business, right? A lot
Well,
of the foundation.
Panel Claw is a great example. They do manufacturing here in Illinois. Yaskawa Selectria does manufacturing here in Illinois, making very intelligent inverters, homemade, American-made, military-grade solar inverters right here in our backyard. We could be upping that ante, of course. We're lucky to have Rivian, the EV pickup truck maker, right? That is invested in by Amazon and Ford. Right here in Bloomington Normal, they took over an old Mitsubishi factory. So that is the new economy, right? Renewable energy, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and then the infrastructure that goes along with those things.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, but just to break it down, I mean, the $1 trillion that we're talking about, certainly, something like a third of it immediately could go into clean energy, right? Clean electricity, right? But then another third of it really has to go into clean transportation, right? And that's the EV stuff you're talking about. And there's a lot of great work happening there. And there's, 20 companies that went public with a SPAC last year that are in the electric vehicle space, and they're all looking for manufacturing locations. They're all looking for places to do their work, from Lordstown Motors to others. And, and then the last third is, a mishmash of, getting clean agriculture going. I mean, even Monsanto Bayer now have a sustainability plan where they're paying farmers to sequester carbon in their soil, to practice regenerative farming. They're paying farmers, right? This is Monsanto Bayer, right?
What is their incentive to do that?
Because the soil is actually more productive. We've known this for 30 years, right? When soil carbon is as low as it is today, which is probably 0.5%, you've got to get it up to about 5 or 6 or 7%. You can get it as high as 12%. And when that happens, the fields don't flood because the soil actually has the ability to hold more water,
Mm-hmm.
right? That you don't need as many nutrients, you don't need as much fertilizer,
Yeah.
right? You don't have as much runoff, right? So all of those algae bloom issues and all the other things become a lot easier. And so we're in a situation now where this is not, sort of hippy dippy stuff anymore. This is stuff that's funded by the US Department of Agriculture. They, in their own data, shows that this is real. The Walton family has funded a lot of the research out of Chicago to verify that all of it's true. And now Monsanto and Bayer are saying, "Hey, we've got our own stuff." But then you got Indigo Ag, and you've got Nori, and you've got a bunch of other companies as well. And they're saying, "Let's go. We're willing to pay you for the carbon credits that you're owed for sequestering carbon in your soil."
And honestly, this is where you and I differ on solar farm development. I think it's appropriate to take industrial ag out of rotation and convert that to solar farms. Planting native plants, talk about building the carbon store in the soil. Um, it's going to be night and day after 20 years of being a solar farm, that acreage. And we're only talking about a tiny fraction of the landscape, a few percent of the landscape. We're so rich in land, Jigger. It's off the charts. And we're rich in sunlight, right? We have 10,000 times more sunlight than we use in a year. And
Well, I
so,
don't think that we differ, right? I mean, I think that my point is simply that there's enough non-prime ag land that we don't need it to meet our numbers. I think your point is still very accurate, which is we have over 900 million acres in this country that's used for agriculture and ranch land. And the total amount of land that's needed to power the entire United States of America, at least, all the peak demand of the United States of America with solar would be,
but
two, three, 4% of it.
when you actually walk that non-prime farm ground, you recognize that it is lowland, it floods,
Yep.
it's full of trees and shrubs. If you're a solar developer and you have a choice to go to a cornfield or a lowland full of trees, you go to the cornfield every time. Economics drives that decision. And honestly, ecologically, it's a both and, I think. It's good to leave that fallow land, that lowland in fallow land. Let's augment that. Let's add more fallow land. Basically, solar farms are fallow land, right? They're organic farm ground after 20 years, unless you continue some bad vegetation management practices. It's totally unnecessary, though. And if you use the right seed mix and the right management practices. So
Yeah, I don't think we're disagreeing. All I'm saying is that this is a stakeholder process. People will have opinions, and folks are going to be heard, and that's going to work itself out. But I think the notion that you can't find land in Whitehead County to be able to power the entire county plus it's all of its surrounding counties, um, is ridiculous. You can.
yeah,
Like, that land exists, and those local populations will decide which land they want to use, right? And by the way, there's plenty of money from the US Department of Agriculture to subsidize the use of lowlands, right? So it's not like the economics are going to be different one way or the other, right? So if you want to use prime land, I don't think that's a great idea, but if you do, that's great. And then if you want to use lowlands, there's plenty of money available to, take that land out of the system and turn it into something that is a thriving ecosystem, which happens to produce renewable energy.
yeah, it's all about access to infrastructure, also, right?
Yeah.
There's only so many big substations. There's only so many transmission lines. Obviously, we need to build more of those assets, and let's get busy doing that. I'm a big fan of HVDC. I don't know why the US is so slow to go there. We can do underground HVDC, talk about rights of ways, right? Highways, railways. We don't need to put ginormous towers in the sky. But let's talk about the challenges that developers face with interconnection, for example. It can take upwards of 3 years to get an interconnection agreement for a utility scale project with MISO.
Yep.
How do we speed that up?
Well, the only way to speed it up is to, push MISO to be faster, right? MISO has admitted freely that it has been trying to actively thwart renewable energy, except from its utility partners, for the better part of 15 years, right? That has been an active conversation that they have freely admitted. They've also freely admitted this last year that they were wrong and that they are now adopting the posture of aggressively approving renewable energy because the coal plants that they were protecting are no longer worth protecting. And the coal plants they're protecting, in fact, are actually hurting the competitiveness of the businesses located in MISO. So much so that the businesses located in MISO are looking to leave MISO with their load because they believe they can get cheaper power in places that are more friendly to renewable energy. So MISO has said, crap, we're going to have to reverse course because if we want to keep these businesses here, we're going to have to offer them less than 3 cents a kilowatt hour for power, which isn't possible with coal.
Does MISO really care if customers come or go?
Of course they do, because their stakeholders care, right? If they lose load, right, then that means that everyone's rates go up. The notion that MISO is some sort of independent RTO is ridiculous, right? MISO is set up by a board of constituents, mostly utilities and transmission owners, who sit there saying, here's what we want the rules of the game to be, right? And for a long time, those constituents owned a lot of coal plants. Those
Right.
constituents are now saying we're going to shut down those coal plants.
Yeah.
And we need Google to put a data center here, but they're not going to unless you let us build more renewable energy. Because Google has made it clear that they're not going to build a data center in MISO unless they can do a virtual PPA. Right.
Mhm.
And so it's just one of those things where the markets have finally gotten to MISO, and MISO's like, all right, we're open for business, 57 gigawatts. Let's see it. Right. Texas is too, right? Texas is got more gigawatts in the transmission queue there than their whole peak demand. They can meet 100% of the peak demand of Texas with the solar power that's in the queue right now. And pretty much all solar is now putting in 30 to minutes to an hour with the battery storage, so they can shift a good part of that load into the early morning or into the late evening, depending on what the grid needs.
But so are you suggesting that the dominoes are just going to fall because of the economics, that the utilities are actually coming around? I mean, some of the utilities are coming around, the Xcel Energies of the world, the
It's not
NIPSCOs of the
about the
world.
dominoes falling. The new president of the United States has said that every single agency is going to have a climate person, that every single program is going to have a climate lens, that we are going to be at virtually 100% clean energy by 2035, right? That is going to happen. In order for that to happen in 15 years, it will take, as you suggested, a World War II effort level of deployment, right? And so people need to get on board, or they're going to be cut out of the economic windfall that is going to come from this conversion. There is no chance whatsoever that you can fight this for 5 years and then benefit from the programs in the back 10 years. If you're not on board in the next week and a half, right, by January 20th, then you're going to be left behind, because all of the planning is going to get done in the next 6, 9, and 12 months, right? And if you're not part of that planning process, then you're not part of the planning process, right? And you're going to get whatever scraps are left over after the fact.
Well, but those 57 gigawatts that are in the MISO queue, those are geographically identified already. Uh, if you're in Whiteside County and you don't have any of those projects, you can't just wave your magic wand and make the developers appear out of nowhere, right?
Sure, you can. 57 gigawatts, by the way, is not enough, right? The MISO peak demand is about 125 gigawatts. So we need to build about 125 gigawatts of solar across MISO. And so when you think about like what's left to do, there's about 70 gigawatts left to deploy. And so Whiteside County wants their part of the next 70 gigawatts. They're going to have to tell us soon because the solar developers already know where the other 70 gigawatts with the land looks like, right? Like all of Whiteside County has been prospected for community solar. It's not like people didn't crawl over Whiteside County for community solar. And Skip Lee, who I love, and his son, who's amazing, right, didn't do a lot to bring those people into Sterling, Illinois. But at the end of the day, that land has been prospected. People actually know which sites have lower transmission or distribution interconnection costs than others, right? I mean, think about all the different pieces of land that were evaluated by ComEd and Ameren during this last feature cycle.
So let's give our listeners, let's pretend that we're getting the ear of some local government officials and landowners. In my experience, if you have a landowner or a group of landowners that own substantial acreage, say 10,000 acres, that really gets the attention of renewable energy developers because it simplifies their process tremendously.
Sure.
Just the nuts and bolts of getting projects moving forward. And so, but if you're a local AHJ, how do you frame this to the rest of your constituents? Okay, boys, let's circle the wagons and get some green energy going in our county.
Well, I mean, you can frame it however you want, right? But the American Civil Engineering Society has framed it as you guys all have a D minus for infrastructure, right? So that local AHJ needs whatever. They need a working wastewater treatment plant. They need to replace lead pipes, right, for water. They need expanded transit, right, for their population. They need, cheaper electricity bills. They need lots of things, right? All of those things are possible today with technology that we invented 20 years ago or more, right? They are all possible. And now you've got a government who is willing to invest the dollars into the planning. Remember, we don't need a lot of money from the federal government anymore because most of these technologies are cost effective at this point. What we need is leadership and planning, right? We need all of that, because for a lot of these counties, they don't want to get their source of truth from you. They want to get their source of truth from the Department of Energy, from the USDA, from, their local government bureau who, heretofore has been, couching all of their terms in hedged manners. They're saying, well, this stuff might be coming, it might be better, but we're not sure yet. The data is not clear. This new administration is going to say the data is crystal clear. This stuff is better in every single way. It's cheaper, it's better for you, it creates more local jobs, and it has lower operating costs over time, right? And it produces more local income. So that's where we are, right? We are at a point where we're back to the 1950s where everyone had a job, right? That the middle class was thriving. That is where we are headed. And when that occurs, one of the things we need to do better this time around is to make sure that that everyone is included, right? Including minority communities and frontline communities and others, which were not allowed to really participate due to redlining and other things in the 1950s. We're going to change that this time around, right? That's part of what President-elect Biden has said. But at the end of the day, make no mistake, the technologies are ready. The government is going to help educate everybody as to why the technologies are ready and how they've been piloted and how they're best installed. And I think what you see is, in the stock market, folks are selling off fossil fuel companies like there's nobody's business, right? Because they know that the growth rates there are close to zero. That we may never use as much oil ever again as we did in 2019.
Yep. So we're going to pour $1 trillion into the economy every year.
That's the
And
private sector that's pouring $1 trillion of economy every year. The federal government's contribution of that might be $35 billion of it, right? $1 trillion is going to come from the private sector every year.
And what is the ROI for society? Is it 3-to-1?
Well, I don't know that it's calculable, right? Today we're on track to $1 trillion of losses calculated in California last year due to wildfires and public safety shutoffs and all sorts of other disasters. You look at like NOAA under the Trump administration declared that 2020 was the worst year on record for natural disasters in the United States, from hurricanes to wildfires. And so I don't know, you tell me what it costs to make the planet livable and what the ROI is to make the planet livable. I think it's pretty damn high, right?
Yeah.
I mean, on top of that, you've got farms in the Midwest. They're not going to ever be able to produce, produce again, right? The farmland's moving north because of climate change.
Yeah, we now have armadillos in Illinois because they're migrating north because of climate change.
What is that worth? What is the ROI on that? What is the ROI on saving your, way of life? I don't know. You could put a number on it. I don't think there is a number to put on it. My sense is that like at the end of the day, the private sector is coming in because they believe that all of this infrastructure pays for itself. Not only does it pay for itself, it actually is cheaper than the alternative, which is, just doing things the same way you've been doing them for 50 years. And so that's why the private sector is involved. And my sense is the ROI of around giving, particularly white men who've been completely disaffected since the 1980s, when all of this industrial capacity left the Midwest and went to China. And most of those people and their kids have, basically never had a good job in their entire life. And they're in their late 40s now. And those are the folks who are just stark raving mad right now, protesting the vote in Congress today and all the other things. Like giving them a job is how you solve what ails them.
Absolutely. Yep. I totally agree. I like the 3-to-1. That's a Jeremy Rifkin analysis. And of course it's actually infinite, but because it creates a safe future for humanity. If my children's children want to not be constantly on the move and worried about the next disaster, right, we have to make this investment. You make it sound so simple though, Jigar. And I'm maybe I'm a half, glass is half empty guy, but I don't think it's that easy of just saying it's going to happen, take it or leave it. And, either you're in or you're out. I think it's a little more nuanced than that.
Tim, this year or last year, I turned 46 years old, right? I grew up in a small town in Illinois. My dad was from India, right? Because of all of the racism and whatnot in this country. He and many other Indian American doctors had to go to rural towns that hadn't had doctors in 30, 40 years, right? That's where he went to in Sterling, Illinois. They were nothing but extraordinary to us. I still love the place I grew up in. I was born in India, came over here when I was 1. I went to the University of Illinois, a land grant university that was still super affordable to go to. It was only like $1,500 a semester to go there, right? When I went there in 1993. I studied solar power when I was there. Today, the International Energy Agency has said that 90% of everything that was installed in the entire world in 2020 was clean energy. 90% of everything in the entire world, that includes China, India, and Brazil, was clean energy. That came about because a guy who cared deeply about solar power in, Sterling High School worked on it for most of his adult life. Obviously, there are thousands of us who did, right? I was only one person. But like, this has all happened, and I'm 46 years old. My son today is 5 years old. In 2050, he's going to be 35, right? We are not on track to 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees. But to suggest for a moment that my experience since 1990 to today isn't remarkable, and that this country is not capable of reaching the goals that we need to reach by 2050 and inspiring the rest of the world to follow us at this level of breakneck speed, just isn't my experience. I agree that this country has not attempted to do big things in the last 40 years, but it can do big things, and it has done big things, and I think it will do big things again.
Yeah, I'm not saying we can't do it. I'm saying we really need to help people with the playbook. I don't think it just is an aha thing. I think people need a playbook, and I don't think that it's obvious. You know, there's 100 counties in Illinois. Most of those county officials don't have connections to the clean energy industry yet. In 10 years, they will.
I don't know if that's true. Every one of those 100 counties has heard from a clean energy developer,
Well, yeah.
and they still have their business card. They may have ignored them for the last 4 years.
Yeah, the zoning officials. Okay.
Well, fine, but like the zoning officials know who the county commissioner is and can pass the card off. There's only 100,000 people who live in most of those counties. And so, like, it's not that hard for them to actually get in touch with the people they ignored for the last 4 years and say, you know what? I wasn't listening the first time around. Explain to me again what you were telling me.
But get this. Okay, we're doing a lot of work in Will County in the suburbs, the south suburbs of Chicago.
Yep.
Those that AHJ, the county of Will, saw 14 community solar projects go through special use permitting. Of those projects, only 2 or 3 actually came to fruition. And so those guys are scratching their head going, if this is so real, Jigar Shah, why are so few projects actually getting built?
Well, because the governor hasn't figured out what to do to fix FIJA. You and I both know that FIJA was done with 6 days notice, right? ComEd tried everything they could to subsidize their nuclear plants without helping the renewable energy industry at all. If they could copy HB6 in Ohio and screw over the renewable energy industry, they would have. And they tried. They then partnered with Dynergy to like save all the coal plants down south in Illinois to like, create enough votes to get that deal done. And at the last moment, with 6 days left to go in the legislative session, they were like, fine, we'll work with the renewable energy industry, but we're going to hold our nose doing it. So FIJA was imperfect. I get it. The legislation was not perfect, and the implementation of it was even less perfect. Fine. We have a shot to fix it now. And once it gets fixed, I think you will see a boom in the state of Illinois that they still can't actually even imagine.
Yeah, we're ready. We're ready for FIJA Part 2. We're ready for that fix. And the legislature didn't meet in November. So that was a problem. The pandemic has definitely impacted that process. And there's this other thing that I'm curious what you think about it. It's easy for lawyers to derail things and slow them down. It's much harder to get the project done, meaning the new legislation, the new, let's face it, the utilities are still very powerful and they want things.
Well,
they're not going to just roll over and say, oh, sure, bring it on. Let's get 100 gigawatts of solar in MISO.
No, they will. Tim, like this is what I'm saying. I think that you remember things as they were 5 years ago. I mean, today, the most valuable energy company on Wall Street is NextEra because of their renewable energy division, not ExxonMobil, right? Like, I mean, Exelon is in free fall right now. Like, I don't know what it is that you think you want to do, but I would not put 100% of your retirement into Exelon stock, right? And so this power that you speak of, They would much rather be us than themselves. The vast majority of utility companies you talk to are saying we need to radically change our business model because our investors view us as irrelevant. And if our regulators view us as irrelevant, then we have a problem. And remember, what we're doing here in the United States is 20 years behind what they're doing in the UK from a regulatory standpoint. From a regulatory standpoint, they've already gone to performance-based regulation in the UK, where there is no rate basing anymore, right? You either hit the mark and get paid, or you miss the mark and you don't get paid. That's how it works in the UK. That is coming to the United States of America. We will have performance-based regulation where they either decarbonize and get paid, or they don't decarbonize and they don't get paid. But the notion that they're going to continue to be able to rate base and we're going to keep this current system in place for much longer is ridiculous. And everyone knows it, which is why utility stocks are not doing that well.
So when ComEd falls, what rises from those ashes?
Well, remember, ComEd is just a brand. ComEd is not going to fall, right? The hardworking men and women who actually run the grid and who make sure that we keep the lights on and repair the lines when we have a storm or a tornado that hits Illinois, they will still be there and they will still be doing extraordinary work. But in the future, they will be equipped with the right tools by which to do their work better. ComEd has denied their own workforce the tools necessary to be relevant in this new future. That will not be the case forever, right? Somebody will equip them with tools, with iPads that say, here is the likeliest area of the grid that's going to fail next. Go fix that first. Don't do the ones that were next in line to get fixed. The data shows that these are the ones that are probably going to fail next. They have all that data. They just haven't equipped their people with it, right? They haven't used machine learning and AI, right? To the point where Sunny Garg, who was like the number 6 person at Exxon, left to join one of those AI companies because he was like so sick and tired of Exxon not implementing the technologies he was investing into with Exxon's money, right? And so the change is coming. I get the fact that it looks slow, but that's how change works. Change, it basically always looks slow and then it's too fast for you.
Yep, it's ice, 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 water. So in the last minute or two here, what else should the next generation of leaders be thinking about? What is the next handhold, right, for dynamic young professionals who get it, who understand that AI and robotics and storage are the keys to the new economy?
Well,
How can they climb further faster?
when I was at Sterling High School, we had a vocational school that was next door. And I took a lot of classes at that vocational school. That vocational school is still going to be critically important. This is not about AI and robotics. This is about people getting a certificate in HVAC maintenance. This is about people actually joining the laborers union or the roofers union. I'd stay away from the IBEW, but there's a lot of other unions that are amazing, right? This is about people actually getting good skills by which we rebuild our world. We, in fact, have to rebuild the entire world over the next 20 years. That is a lot of work. And it is about people going to vocational school and getting the training they need to be able to do this work safely so they can return back to their families every night after hard days of work. And that's what we're talking about here.
You didn't answer my question though.
Well, no, but that is the answer, right? The answer
I agree.
is
We need lots more people in the trades. I totally agree. And I talk about this on almost every podcast that I record, but you also have been beating this drum of leadership.
Look, the vast majority of these leaders are not going to lead. They're going to be forced to lead by me and you. They're going to be forced to lead by people who are graduating from high school that have said, hey, I listened to this podcast. I've heard that my future is in this thing. Why do we not have these classes in the vocational school? And when local people and local PTAs and local boards like say, hey, why don't we have these things? Well, then you start to have these things. That's how this works, is rabble rousing works. And that is what I'm pushing for, is rabble rousing. Do I wish that the mayor of Sterling, Illinois would show leadership here? Yes. Do I think he's going to show any leadership at all? Of course not. I have no confidence whatsoever that he's going to show leadership. But I do believe that the people of Sterling, Illinois are going to rise up and say to him, hey, we have this opportunity. You need to be accommodative to that. And he's going to say, sure, if my constituents are asking for it, I'm happy to do it. And that's how this works. And that's how we got 2 senators voted in, in Georgia last night, was a whole bunch of people who were text messaging and calling and knocking on doors. And that's what this is going to take too. So yes, I wish we had enlightened leadership a la Plato, but we don't. What we have is a whole bunch of people who are well educated at the local level that actually can force their leaders to be better.
All right. I want to make a couple of announcements. You can find all of this content on the Solar Podcast and the Clean Power Hour at cesnrg.com/videos. Just yesterday, we dropped a video on the Next Tracker Gemini 2 and Portrait project in Northern Illinois with Sunshine Solar. We bring you great tools like Anderson optimization for utility scale development. We bring you actual solar developers like Robert Howard with Greenleaf Advisors. We bring you tools and technology and thought leaders on energy storage and fire safety. Nick Warner, that was a wonderful episode. So check it out, cesnrg.com/videos. I want to thank my guest, Jigar Shah, the president of Generate Capital and native Illinoisan. Thank you so much for coming on the show again, Jigar. We hope to see you back soon.
My pleasure, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.